Sources say DeAndre Hopkins is in the process of being traded to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is my 4th year covering the NFL for you guys, and in that time span, I don't think I've ever seen so many wide receiver ones getting traded in the middle of the season. And it appears as the best team in the NFL, with the quarterback that has thrown the most interceptions in the NFL this year, has officially traded for a superstar wide receiver in a trade that, believe it or not, I actually predicted on X. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help us make this push to 1 million subscribers. And now that we get all that out of the way, work! We dominated opening night on Prize Picks, hitting on the Anthony Edwards free square and making an easy $75, and then making another $150 on my Hauser LeBron James picks. We had a lot of NFL success as well, all in all making about $400 over the past week. Now, if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. I give away my picks for free on Instagram at TheFlightMike or Snapchat at FlightMikeSnap, and thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? About a week ago, Davante Adams and the Las Vegas Raiders would lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Davante Adams would then get traded to the New York Jets, where he would lose once again to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is hysterical because he went from a team that is currently 2-5 to another team that is currently 2-5. The thing about the Davante Adams trade that I found to be very comical is the fact that right before Davante Adams was traded to the New York Jets, shortly after Robert Saleh was fired by the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers said this.
It's interesting the amount of power that people think that I have, which I don't.
It's just so funny. He comes out, he says, I don't have as much power as you think, and then the Jets made a trade that, in my opinion, I didn't think was all that necessary. Yeah, don't get me wrong, it's cool to see Davante Adams reunited with Aaron Rodgers, but on paper, the Jets have a wide receiver core that's just fine. The Jets' offense was just fine. I mean, you have Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, and if you need a wide receiver that understands how Aaron Rodgers did things in the past, you have Allen Lazard. The only reason the New York Jets made this move is because of the chemistry between Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, and because Aaron Rodgers was manifesting it for the past year and a half.
I love Davante. I can't wait to play with him again.
I mean, it was clear Davante Adams really wanted to compete, and he was really struggling with not only the quarterbacks that the Raiders had, but also Antonio Pierce for some reason.
Your coach Jedi actually likes this post about you getting traded.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know exactly what that was about. Yeah, I haven't spoke to him. Honestly, it's hard to comment on. I just keep my head down and keep doing my thing, and let the chips fall where they may.
So the New York Jets eventually decided to trade for Davante Adams, and the Las Vegas Raiders got some pretty solid compensation in return for him because, well, the Raiders were in a rebuild and the Jets just wanted to figure out a way to establish some chemistry. And the unique part about this is typically you don't see a wide receiver one get traded in the middle of the season, but in the case of Davante Adams, there is familiarity with the New York Jets, and there's also familiarity with Aaron Rodgers. So what the hope is that they will be able to get up to speed and have established full team chemistry and have Davante Adams fully integrated in the Jets offense within the next couple of weeks or so. And in the case of Amari Cooper, the Buffalo Bills were hoping for the same thing. Amari Cooper has had a history of being able to adapt to NFL offenses relatively quickly. The best example of this was when he was traded in the middle of the season to the Dallas Cowboys. For the rest of the season, he still had over 700 receiving yards for the Cowboys, which is absolutely insane considering the fact that he had to learn a brand new offense in the middle of the season. But my point is that you don't typically see moves like this getting made in the middle of the season for this particular reason, unless if you happen to be the Kansas City Chiefs, who have happened to make a major in-season trade for a wide receiver each and every year for the last 3 years. You see, in the 2022 offseason, the Kansas City Chiefs had an agreement with Tyreek Hill to sign him to a contract extension. And then Davante Adams came out, got traded to the Las Vegas Raiders, and completely reset the wide receiver market. Seeing this, Tyreek Hill asked for more money from the Kansas City Chiefs, but the Chiefs just couldn't afford it. So the Chiefs agreed to trade Tyreek Hill for a first-round pick, a second-round pick, 2 fourth-round picks, and a 6th-round pick. Tyreek Hill got traded to a state that had no state income tax and got paid as the highest wide receiver in the entire NFL. And the Chiefs really didn't have a choice but to do this. This was even funnier because Tyreek Hill would spend the next year and a half just throwing shade at the Kansas City Chiefs.
As far as accuracy wise, I'm going with Tua all day. Chiefs Kingdom, when the Miami Dolphins come to Arrowhead Stadium this year, guess what we gonna do? Guess what we gonna do? I hate to say it, man. I hate to throw up the peace sign against y'all. I hate to do it. But guess what? I'm gonna be y'all worst enemy that day. I'm gonna be y'all worst enemy that day.
And in the meantime, the Chiefs were doing everything they possibly could to find some sort of replacement for Tyreek Hill. Whether it was signing Juju Smith-Schuster in that same offseason, bringing in Marquez Valdez-Scantling because he had a reputation of being a fast wide receiver as well, drafting Sky Moore, who was known for his speed coming out of the NFL draft, or trading for Kadarius Toney in the middle of the season for a 3rd-round pick because he was compared to Tyreek Hill coming into the NFL draft. And although none of those wide receivers were bona fide hits, Patrick Mahomes didn't really miss a beat. In the 2022 season, he threw for the most passing yards of his career, 41 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. He would win NFL MVP, and the Kansas City Chiefs would win a Super Bowl. But that didn't stop the Chiefs from continuing to try to find their replacement for Tyreek Hill. And in the very next offseason, I actually speculated that they could potentially sign DeAndre Hopkins, but they never did. Instead, opting to draft Rashee Rice in the 2023 NFL draft, letting Juju Smith-Schuster walk in free agency, and establishing a brand new offensive identity. You see, in 2023, the Kansas City Chiefs weren't necessarily depending on Patrick Mahomes to cook anymore. He was still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but he wasn't throwing over 40 touchdowns this season, still threw for over 4,000 passing yards. He had a career high 14 interceptions as well, 67% completion percentage, and 27 touchdowns. But it didn't really matter because once again, Kansas City Chiefs were able to win a Super Bowl. This time, they were more dependent on their defense and establishing the run, while placing Patrick Mahomes in a significantly different role, more depending on his abilities as a situational quarterback and depending on him more as an extremely high-end game manager. Bear in mind, when I say high-end game manager, I'm not saying that Patrick Mahomes was a bad QB. I'm saying that Patrick Mahomes didn't necessarily have a dependable wide receiver to throw 50+ yard passes to anymore. But things completely changed for the Kansas City Chiefs this past year. Once again, they went into the offseason trying to completely remake their wide receiver room. And to be honest, they made some very promising moves in the offseason, signing Marquise Hollywood Brown, trading up with the Buffalo Bills so they could draft Xavier Worthy, which pretty much fits into the Tyreek Hill mold of wide receiver. The Chiefs are still looking for that Tyreek Hill replacement, and this is probably the closest they've ever gotten with Xavier Worthy. Not saying that Xavier Worthy is the next coming of Tyreek Hill, but certainly a lot better than Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. But of course, still not even close to the wide receiver that Tyreek Hill was, but at the same time, Tyreek Hill had 593 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns in his rookie season, so for all you know, maybe that's how his career turns out. When Marquise Hollywood Brown said he was going to be out for an extended period of time, the Chiefs signed Juju Smith-Schuster, who was recently released by the New England Patriots. But then 4 games into the season, and Patrick Mahomes would accidentally injure his best wide receiver, nearly tearing Rashee Rice's ACL, which thankfully he didn't, but now Rashee Rice is out for an extended period of time on top of Hollywood Brown, and as of last week, Juju Smith-Schuster was out with an injury. Now here's where it gets really funny. Tyreek Hill's career has been the exact inverse of Patrick Mahomes' career. What do I mean by that? While the Kansas City Chiefs have experienced tremendous team success, and in the case of Patrick Mahomes, he experienced tremendous individual and team success in the 2022 season, winning the MVP and winning a Super Bowl, Tyreek Hill solely experienced remarkable individual success with the Miami Dolphins, gaining the most receiving yards in his entire career in his first year with the Miami Dolphins with over 1,700 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns before following up that performance with a nearly 1,800-yard receiving season in 2023 with 13 touchdowns that season. But unfortunately, things would come to a screeching halt for Tyreek Hill. And this is where things would get really interesting, because after Tua would go down with a concussion in the earlier part of the season, Tyreek Hill started posting these really cryptic messages on social media that I didn't really pay any attention to. Hill would do some weird stuff like posting his Chiefs highlights onto his Snapchat story, and that combined with the fact that his starting QB was out and the Miami Dolphins were headed for a losing season, in addition to the fact that Tyreek Hill's contract is close to expiring, has resulted in some speculation that Tyreek Hill was trying to find his way back to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, from the Chiefs' perspective, they certainly could have executed such a trade, and then the Chiefs have $25 million of cap space for 2025, which would fit Tyreek Hill's guaranteed salary of $27.8 million. But alas, that's not what ended up happening. Tyreek Hill is going to remain a member of the Miami Dolphins. But alas, the Kansas City Chiefs wouldn't end up trading for Tyreek Hill. Our original plan today in terms of content strategy was to bring you guys a huge trade rumor that we found out about yesterday involving the Rams trying to trade Cooper Kupp.
If the Rams are willing to take on the salary I heard that they're willing to do, they are definitely open to trading Cooper Kupp. So we'll see if they'll be able to get a deal done. I just don't think Kansas City has enough money, even if the Rams were to take on some of that salary.
Now, if you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, you're very well aware that we do cover trade rumors whenever we get them from reputable sources. And I consider Diana Rossini to be a very reputable source. But the thing is, I also feel like it's my responsibility to explain the trade rumor and discuss whether or not the trade rumor makes sense. So when I woke up this morning, I planned on dropping the Cooper Kupp trade rumor video on you guys, but then a trade actually happened. My point being that you're gonna get a video on the Cooper Kupp situation later on today. But the reason I'm bringing this up is the top team that I thought would be interested in Cooper Kupp is the Kansas City Chiefs. And believe it or not, they were the top team that were interested in Cooper Kupp. According to Diana Rossini, the Kansas City Chiefs and the LA Rams discussed a Cooper Kupp trade, but the Super Bowl champs needed a trade with the team that was willing to take on a large chunk of the salary, which the Rams were willing to do, but they didn't want to give up high draft picks, and the Rams would have wanted a second-round pick in return for Cooper Kupp. So they decided to pivot to the very next best thing. According to Adam Schefter, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Tennessee Titans are working to finalize a trade that would send wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins to Kansas City, league sources tell ESPN, which is something that I really was anticipating happening ever since we found out Davante Adams was going to get traded to the Jets. I tweeted out, announced DeAndre Hopkins getting traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, I think we're on a little bit of a roll here, but the reason I was so confident in this happening is the Chiefs didn't really need to give up much to get DeAndre Hopkins. The trade compensation is DeAndre Hopkins is expected to go from Tennessee to Kansas City for a conditional 4th-round pick per sources. I already know what I could expect fans to say.
Mike, DeAndre Hopkins is washed.
And so far, yeah, he hasn't had the greatest season for the Tennessee Titans. In 6 games played, he had 173 yards and 15 receptions. Last year, he went over 1,000 yards, but at the same time, this is a wide receiver that's had Will Levis throwing him the football, and Will Levis is on a generational run this season, but it's more for meme-worthy moments as opposed to playing well under center. I know it's kind of tough to go from Will Levis / Mason Rudolph to the quarterback that's leading the NFL in interceptions, but I'm sure DeAndre Hopkins will be just fine. For fans that think DeAndre Hopkins is still washed, just take a look at him going up against Sauce Gardner in press coverage. He's obviously not prime DeAndre Hopkins, but he's also not Tennessee Titans Julio Jones. Especially given the situation that the Chiefs are in, DeAndre Hopkins is in a situation where he is going to go from only getting targeted 21 times throughout the entire season, and I'm personally expecting DeAndre Hopkins to have a Randy Moss Patriots era-like effect on the Kansas City Chiefs. Sharp Football puts it best on X, saying the DeAndre Hopkins to the Chiefs trade makes a ton of sense from a utility perspective. The Titans didn't have a high wide receiver target rate because Will Levis can't accurately hit one downfield. The Chiefs couldn't have a high wide receiver target rate because they didn't have any wide receivers to target. And that's the truth. They've been battered and bruised throughout the entire season. Ever since Travis Kelce started dating Taylor Swift, it's like he had the talent sucked out of him. I'm just kidding. But this didn't take that much compensation to get it done. What this does kind of mean is that the Tennessee Titans don't really think Will Levis is their quarterback of the future, and they're just trying to get any assets at all whatsoever for the players that they currently have. Tyreek Hill is still being cryptic as ever, tweeting, and I honestly think the memes in regard to this are hysterical. article. You have Tyreek Hill looking at Patrick Mahomes and DeAndre Hopkins having a good time. I love this one meme of Mike McDaniel, who's definitely having a brutal season because of Tua's injury. At the end of the day, I give both sides an A+ for this. In the Titans situation, I think it'd be wasteful to hold on to D-Hop and not get something in return moving forward. It's not like you're contending for a Super Bowl this year, let's be honest. From the Kansas City Chiefs perspective, I think this could be as impactful as trading for Cooper Kupp. I'm not saying one wide receiver is better than the other, but DeAndre Hopkins is 32 years old, isn't coming off of an injury, and you'd only have to give up a 4th round pick to get him, as opposed to trading a 2nd round pick for Cooper Kupp, who's currently coming off of an injury. We're gonna bring you guys the Cooper Kupp video later on today, but as a fan of football, I'm actually really excited to see the return of 2021 Patrick Mahomes, because DeAndre Hopkins is easily the best wide receiver Mahomes has had since Tyreek Hill. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.